Good morning, good morning, good morning, and happy Friday, folks tuning in today. We are back spitting bars at you first thing in the morning. Look at that. We're back in the Digital Weather Center. I was with the Navy yesterday, and I was absent from the studio until about 3 in the afternoon. So I do apologize for those of you on News 6 Plus, News 6, the YouTube channel, and over on Just Weather. If you kind of saw the absence and were like, hey, what's going on? But luckily, we haven't had too much in the way of significant weather to talk about. I'm News 6 meteorologist David Nazario, and today we're rocking into the weekend on a chilly note, and we're going to talk all about that and some bombing out that's going on off the Pac Northwest coast. With that being said, let's get right into it. This is the infrared satellite shot, and you know what? I apologize. Let's go ahead and let's rein it in. I'm a little excited today. I'm caffeinated. It's Friday before a really good weekend for us here in Central Florida. But hello to everybody joining us on News 6 Plus, everybody over on the News 6 YouTube channel, as well as Just Weather. It's great to see everybody popping off in the chat. Christopher Standard Time, good morning. Erica Garcia, great to have you with us, as well as Melissa Riley, Joe, Mimi Lovegood, Joe Julia, Sherry Pie. We also have Mick and Marley, good to see you as well. And my buddy Mike out in New Orleans, good to see everybody. Now that we've gotten the formalities out of the way, let's get my big old head out of the way and start talking satellite imagery. So I'm sure we can all see two glaring features here. One, you might not be as evident because, I'm going to tell you it's a catch-22 here in a second. But if you look over the Pacific Northwest and the Great Basin of Idaho, Montana, Upper Utah, and portions of Nevada, we have that enormous comma cloud feature that's moving in. That was what I call our Cat 3 major non-hurricane hurricane for the Pacific Northwest, but in all seriousness, that is the bomb cyclone. I believe one analysis actually had it as far low as around 945 millibars in the center of circulation, which is, as we all know, comparable to a Category 3, if not a Category 4 hurricane out in the tropics. Thankfully, that's not what this was. Had a very broad wind field to it, so yes, there were some very strong and damaging winds along the coastlines of British Columbia, Washington State, Oregon, and especially Northern California, and lots of flooding due to the atmospheric river setup on the south and southeast quadrant of that cyclone. The rest of the big picture, however, is looking phenomenal. If you look across the lower 48, outside of what looks to be a little bit of mountain influence over the front range of Colorado there, we are clear. Maybe seeing a little bit of snow and some light shower activity with that secondary spin that's up over the mid-Atlantic and the Northeast. And then the second glaring feature I wanted to kind of pull your attention to is, believe it or not, the lack thereof. If you look down here, and I'll bring out my handy-dandy pen tool for y'all, there's nothing down there. Nothing in the tropics. All was quiet on the tropical front. So if you've been hearing things about the hurricane season, if you're still hearing somebody tooting their horn about another hurricane or something like that, no, we are definitely a dead stick down there in the Gulf. Look at that. Not a single cloud almost. The Caribbean, a big difference in comparison to when Raphael and Sarah were just recently down there. And then it looks like there is a weak tropical, we'll call it a perturbation, not a wave. Might be a wave, but at this point, we don't really have too many of those coming off of Africa making their way through the MDR at this point. So I wouldn't even go as far as to call it a wave. Here's an up-close personal look at that bomb cyclone. And we have some very interesting things going on here. And I'm going to go ahead and stop the loop so I can draw you through it, all right? So this here is what we would call a Type B comma cloud. And the reason we call it a Type B, it's kind of transitioning to an A if you look at where the jet is. But Type B would be just a distinct comma like you'd write down on a paper or when you're typing out a letter, good morning, comma, so-and-so. you can see that textbook comma shape, but the reason I say it's trying to transition to an A is we're starting to see the separation between the comma head and the source or the surge region here between what's happening on the west-hand side and the right-hand side on the east, where a lot of that deep rainfall and cloud cover engulfs the Pac Northwest and Northern California. That's your jet stream trying to rip it apart and maybe try to develop another system as it moves inland over the northern and central Rockies. We also have what's left of the original OG bomb cyclone still spinning out here. It's kind of hard to see on the satellite, because we've lost a lot of the cloud top temps with it. But where I have it circled, that's your real low pressure system right there. And as the jet rips through this new comma feature, we're getting that secondary system to spin up. And then if you look just beyond that, back upstream over the central and northern Pacific, I almost said Atlantic, I'm so used to it, we have another baroclinic leaf style feature getting ready to dig in. And I think that, as we go down the pike, is what's likely to begin to bring us another huge round of cold air. Unfortunately, just after Thanksgiving. Some of us will have a nice, cool, chilly Thanksgiving, but not all of us. And I'll openly admit, I'm kind of discouraged that we're kind of going get smart here in the Southeast. Missed it by that much. Here is a look at the water vapor satellite shot right now. You can see that first strong polar front has made its way down to the border of the Gulf of Mexico, the Atlantic, and the Caribbean Sea. All that dry air is keeping us completely skies clear, not a cloud or a shower in sight as far as the eye could see across the Gulf of Mexico, the Gulf Coast states from Texas all the way through to our viewing area in Florida, even the Bahamas and parts of Cuba that were hit with Rafael and other storms this past hurricane season are getting in on the good action, getting some cooler, drier air down there, which is excellent news, honestly, in my opinion. I think we all need a bit of this polar fall/wintry weather mix to just change things up. We've been hot and hurricane. I'm not even going to say hot and humid. We've been all hot and hurricane pretty much all summer into the first half of fall. It's great we're finally talking fall conditions as opposed to tropical storm so-and-so. Again, got to pull this up. No tropical development expected over the next 7 days, which is always a great piece of news to bring along to you all. I am still watching this just for shoots and giggles because I've been keeping up with these streams. If you notice, we are still very, very, very slowly trying to build a little bit of something down there in the Caribbean. I know that I just reset the loop. I'm going to draw a circle there so you see exactly where it is I'm fixating on. And if we go forward in time, notice we're starting to get some shades of light green down there. And if I pull up my little drop tool here, notice we're up to 23%. I believe it goes a little higher than that, even 24 to 27, and then we start to drop off again. So, I mean, nothing crazy. That's definitely not going to raise an alarm for me. I'm not going to start saying Tony and throwing out the thumbnails, but it's just interesting to see. We started at, I believe, a 3 or 5% chance of depression or tropical formation down there when we met earlier this week and especially last week. And now as we round out the week this Friday morning, we're up to 27%. So we have a 1 in 4 shot now. Again, not giving it a big vote of confidence, but I thought that was just something worthwhile. Pass it along to you lovely folks. And as we get ready to approach our first break, I wanted to turn our attention to the national temps because this is the name of the game. If we really take inventory across the lower 48, you can see we really don't have a hot temperature in sight. I mean, Brownsville, you got to get it together. Usually that's Florida down there sticking out literally like a sore thumb. But we got Brownsville creeping up towards the upper 70s. The rest of us, Miami trying to do its thing as well, getting up into the upper 60s. Not going to say the number out loud because for the sake of the internet enjoying that. But you can see we have 20s up in the Dakotas, into Minnesota, Montana. The higher terrain areas there are also in the low to, or I should say mid to upper 20s. And we are finally starting to feel the full effects of this trough and strong polar front coming down through the southeast United States. And that is going to be the rhythm that we keep over the next 5 to 7 days. Moving us on over to the live radar. Again, looks like maybe some light snow flurries occurring over the Appalachian regions of Tennessee, Kentucky, West Virginia, and Virginia, as a matter of fact, and the Carolinas, which is probably a sight for sore eyes up there. But then the rest of us, again, quiet. I promise I didn't just turn the rain off on this, but you can see Nothing. Sad to say, if I take us on in for a closer look, I'll stop my loop here so I can kind of manipulate it here. If you notice, this is not an error. I used to, before getting used to this system, I thought these were remnant errors or kind of latent warnings to go out. No, sad to say, we still have some folks near Homosassa Springs and the upper portions of the St. Johns in Volusia County, getting into parts of Flagler County where we are still under flood warnings because of Milton. So there are still some folks out there who really don't need the rain, who really don't need anything else for the rest of the calendar year as these floodwaters try to recede as best as they can. So it's very interesting. I thought it was super interesting to see that we are still holding on to some flood warnings. These aren't watches. That means that flood conditions are still actively ongoing, which is just mind-blowing. It's November 22nd. It's been a month and a half since Milton made landfall. We're done with the tropics, and we still have flood warnings out there. So, there's still some folks hurting, which is why we were very steadfast in blasting out that there were more hurricanes on the way, and we're so glad we aren't going to worry about that anytime soon. Coming up after the break, we're going to talk just a little bit about next hurricane season, but we're also really going to dial in and take a look at what Thanksgiving Turkey Day looks like, and then our Black Friday chaos shenanigans, what next weekend looks like for us in store, not only here in Central Florida, but across the rest of the United States. So we will be right back, folks. Don't go anywhere. And we're back. Thank you all so much for sticking around. We're going to take a look at what's ahead for not only this upcoming weekend, but especially as travel kicks off into high gear throughout next Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. I'm sure a lot of folks are already getting their travels underway, but regardless, we're going to take a close look at exactly what's going on out there. And as you can see, the name of the game are these frigid and cold temps. Thanks to that trough axis, you can see highlighted by those moving arrows going from the west down towards the southeast and eventually back up towards the northeast. That's that trough of cold air from up north that has come all the way down to our neck of the woods in the southeast and into the Gulf of Mexico. The surface front is simply highlighting the leading edge of that. Remember that. The cold fronts that we see on our charts are only indicators for us to know exactly where the start, that first little layer of cold air, is located on a weather map or a chart, and that's the best way for us to communicate it to you all, as well as draw our weather predictions and our forecasts to then communicate to you all. So this is Friday. The cold front is moving on out. As you already saw in the water vapor imagery, we are moving far off towards the southeast at this point. And as we continue through time, and I'll bring up the telestrator once again, our little handy-dandy pen tool, not the notebook, but the pen tool in this case, this is unfortunately going to start to work its way out of our area. The high pressure that was brought down with this polar air will start to modify, and I'll show you that on the wind overlay here momentarily. But first, let's take a look at our temperature anomaly. This is where we sit right now, current real time. You can see now through the week ahead, we are going to have another pattern flip. So first and foremost, as we go over the next couple days, those cooler temps you can see are slowly but surely going to fade. And notice how the yellows, the oranges, and the reds are starting to come back until finally our pattern is completely flipped. And this is why I do think we're going to retrograde back into the mid to upper 70s, possibly spiking into the low 80s just in time for Thanksgiving, which, you know, it's always a give and take with weather. I don't know, a lot of you probably don't like the cold weather. A lot of you probably do. It's a mixed bag generally in Central Florida and the rest of the Southeast. So, you know, it's a give and take. Some of us are really going to like what Thanksgiving has in store for us. Others, I'd much rather personally prefer it be in the 60s. It feel like Thanksgiving, but hey, you know what? At least it's not a hurricane Thanksgiving Day. And then as we go further in time, if you notice, as we get into that weekend, this is about Thanksgiving here, but then see what's happening across the rest of the United States. So again, some of us will be in some very blustery, dry and frigid polar temps across the U.S. as our next strong trough comes through. And if I go all the way to the tail end of the loop, see how those temps really nestle in all the way down through the Florida Peninsula. This is as we get into the weekend after Thanksgiving and rock right into an open doorway of December 1st, the final hoorah for the entirety of 2024. And I hope that we're all looking at a very positive end to the year, especially after what we've been through over the last several months. And even earlier this year with the prolific tornado events we had to deal with at the very start of 2024. I have the winds and gusts up here now, just so you all can get a feel for what's happening out there and what's stirring the pot, why it is we have the cold air penetrating right now, and then eventually we're going to start to see that recession of the cold air, or modification as it's called, and you'll see what's called also return flow along the west side of our high pressure that's going to meander into the Atlantic, stirring back those tropical feelings and those tropical conditions from near the equator, down in the Caribbean, back up into the United States. So this is where we are right now. We'll go ahead and fast forward into Saturday and Sunday just real briefly. You can see regardless, high pressure is going to be right overhead. Notice immediately, though, what's changed. We still have some cold air funneling off the terrain of the United States through the southeast here, but then back off towards the west. See that return flow? When we say return, it's coming from the south back to the north. You know, first, we typically are marinating under our subtropical or tropical conditions across the south. When we have these fronts come through, it bullies it out of the way. The reason it's quoted return flow is it starts to come back. It's literally returning. And so this could possibly be a thunderstorm, if not an isolated severe weather scenario for the Great Plains. That's very textbook for that general area. And then slowly but surely, as we get later into the week, this is Sunday, you can see that real return flow, the stronger winds out of the south beginning to finally engulf much of the central portions of the U.S., spreading into the Ohio, Mississippi valleys, the Dixie Alley area, getting out of the plains. And we are still under high pressure, so we'll still be sitting pretty here in Florida, Georgia, the Carolinas, but eventually that's going to continue to ride off towards the east before that next trough can come in and clear us out once more. These are our temps right now. You can see that we are sitting in the upper 50s, low 60s, and into Saturday morning, they're going to get even chillier. Finally, that's where we are likely to start the day for those of us here in the Central Florida viewing area. Tomorrow morning and then Sunday morning is going to be very reminiscent of what we wake up to tomorrow to start the weekend on a very chilly, brr kind of note there, as you can see. So, finally, last but not least, before I unveil the early Turkey Day outlook, I just want to mention I'm putting the bug out there right now. First and foremost, if you have the opportunity to do so and you have the apps, I'm really going to start getting more into my vertical video content and more of my interactive content over on my other social medias, WX Center_Nazario. Make sure you're also following the News 6 Instagram social media pages, follow the YouTube channels, or subscribe. So if you have the capabilities of doing so, definitely drop a follow if you want to get a little more into the interactive content over there, as opposed to waiting for simply the live streams that we do on a daily basis here. I'll go ahead and plug that in the chat as well if you don't, or if you would like to drop a follow. And Jonathan and I are going to be working to start to very slowly roll out content on the next hurricane season. We're not going to do it just yet. It's too soon, Junior, for my Fast and the Furious fans. But there's already things kind of staring at us in the face, and we want to slowly, just very gently, nudge it out there to the public before we start really getting into like the preseason forecast, spring tornado season. Everyone's hyped up again. We're just going to start to have conversations, to say the least. And that's all I'm going to say about that. Here's a look at what we're expecting on Turkey Day. So the facts, as always, dry and breezy the next few days, with the coldest temps coming in tonight and then especially Sunday morning. We are going to start to warm back up to the low 80s for Thanksgiving on Thursday. But in capital letters, we are expecting another drastic cool down right after that. So as you can see, the little sub-caption there missed it by that much. Central Florida. We are probably going to be a little more mild, a little more mild for Turkey Day, but hey, it's still cool enough to where we can crack open windows, leave screen doors kind of closed, and open up the front door, open the garage, however you're going to be celebrating and enjoy the time with friends and family. And that's about it. We are wrapping up our live stream. We've got about 3 minutes for questions. If we have any questions, we shall see. We have Thomas Mates over on News 6. Outside of the PNW, will there be any travel trouble spots next week? An excellent question, Thomas. Thank you so much for dropping that in the chat. So as of right now, Pac Northwest looks to be the predominant area where there could be some travel delays, some struggles, not only at the airport, but down on the roads as well, with those flood and high wind conditions and the higher terrain snowfall that we're likely seeing out there. Maybe a couple of straight instances of delays elsewhere, especially towards the eastern side of the United States with that secondary low system that's helping to push our cold air down into Florida. And then naturally keep a close eye on where your flight is originating from, because you may be sitting in crystal clear conditions down across the rest of the lower 48. But if you have something coming out of Washington, Oregon, Idaho, somewhere in the northwest corner of the U.S., that might cause some issues as well, even if you're far away from the bomb cyclone itself. Let's see. I apologize for asking this, me, Mister, over on Just Weather, but when will Michigan get some snow? So it could be on the horizon here very soon with the next couple of mid-latitude cyclones, strong fall/winter-esque low-pressure systems that are going to be moving across the upper-tier U.S. We could see some of that cold weather stick around enough to where it interacts with the moisture and tries to produce some snow, but I'm not going to try to take a long-range stab at that. I feel as if snow forecasting more difficult than tropical forecasting a lot of the time. So we'll wait and see. We'll play it by ear, but I'm going to keep that question in my back pocket for Monday's update. Is there any, Ray Erickson over on Just Weather, is there any unusual geological landscape in the Triad area that pushes the storms in one way or another? Not necessarily. It really, whenever it comes to storm motion, it really has nothing to do with the surface of the Earth. The only thing that the Earth's surface serves is going to be, elements of instability, moisture, whether we have an inversion or a cap preventing certain types of phenomena from occurring. But a lot of the steering current is really going to be dictated by the large scale pattern down to the small scale above where we're sitting at ground level. The winds, the different temperatures that are going on as you ascend or descend the atmosphere, jets, troughs, cold fronts, ridges, you name it. Captain Cheese Whiz over on Just Weather. Thoughts on another similar event this season as the February 2021 winter storm Uri or Uri? I don't really have any preliminary thoughts just yet because, again, that's way too far out, especially for a winter season. I'd rather take it on a case-by-case basis and see exactly how the pattern sets up going forward, especially since it doesn't look entirely bona fide La Nina, which is something we're really going to hammer out once we start talking a very early glance at tropical season 2025. But folks, that's it for our Friday rendition of the morning weather briefing, the morning Metcon. Thank you so much for tuning in, taking some time out of your Friday morning to join me here in the I did it again, the Digital Weather Center here at News 6. We'll see you all again very soon. I hope you have a fantastic weekend ahead. Take advantage of the good conditions while we can, because I know that, again, what goes up has to go back down. Where there's good, there's always something rough sneaking in on the horizon. So we'll see you again soon. This is the Digital Weather Center signing out.